Hi there and welcome to Tech Life, a channel where I aim to review everything from selfie sticks to laptops to IDs for coding, video editing, software for producing thumbnails, essentially anything tech related. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you have anything that you think I should review, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to review that product. Welcome to C Sharp Beginners Tutorial. This is part 10 and we will be looking at arrays in this video. Applications quite often need the creation and the management of groups of linked items. So, for instance, if you have a good number of integers that are related and you want to group them together, then we would use something like an array as opposed to creating lots of single integer variables. And there's actually more than one way of managing these groups of linked items. One of those is obviously arrays, and we'll be looking at arrays in this video. But another way of creating and managing these groups of variables in C Sharp is using collections. And we'll be looking at collections in two upcoming videos. But for now, we're going to concentrate on arrays. If I quickly bring up this diagram. So this diagram shows a one-dimensional array, and we are saying that numbers potentially is an integer, and so all of the types of these elements will be of the same type. And if we say that numbers is an integer, then all of these other elements will be integers. One thing to note with C Sharp, the arrays the array indexing begins at 0, so it's 0 indexed. So the very first element here would be accessed using an index number of 0, and then the one after that would be 1, and then 2, and so forth. So the first thing we need to do is declare our array, and in order to do so, we would do something like this. So we declare array by defining its data type and giving the array a name, but we also use these square brackets. So the first part here is the data type, the square brackets, and then the name of the array. So that is declaring an array. Having declared an array, we need to initialize the array. Okay, so declaring an array doesn't actually initialize it. We have to create an instance of an array. Arrays are reference types, and in order to create an instance of a reference type, we have to use the keyword new. So if I can quickly bring up a diagram. So in this statement, what we are doing is we are creating an array, and the name we give that array is balance. The array has a type, and that type is double, and we use the new keyword in order to instantiate this array. And finally, the array has 10 elements. Each of those elements will contain a value, and that value can only be of type double. And the first element will have an index number of 0, and the last one will have an index number of 9. So, okay, after we have declared and initialized our array, we can start assigning values to the elements within the array. So if I bring up the statement, so here again we're going to use the example we used before, where we used the array name as balance. Again, it's of a type double, and it contains 10 elements. Once we have this array initialized, then we can start adding values to each element. So here we're saying that the very first element, which starts at index number 0, we are going to assign a value of 4500.0 to that very first element. So the first element in that array will contain this value, which is of type double. And there are various different ways of populating our array. So we don't have to populate the array using one element at a time. So in these two examples, what we are doing is we are declaring an array. Its name is marks. The elements within that array can only be integers. And we've said marks will have 5 elements. And then as directly after that, we've actually gone ahead and populated each element. So 99, 98, 92, 97, and 95. Each one of these values will sit in a separate element within this array called marks. Below that, we've got an example of an array. We've created an array. It's called marks, but this time note that we haven't specified the number of elements. When we use the new int, we use the square brackets, and it doesn't contain a number as it did in the example above that. But we've implicitly created 5 elements within this array because after we've instantiated the array, we've gone ahead and populated 5 elements. So 99, 98, 92, 97, 95. Again, we'll go and sit in each of the elements within that array. Two different ways to declare, instantiate, and populate arrays, and both of these were integer arrays. Once we have populated our arrays, obviously we need to be able to access the values within the arrays. And one possible way of doing that would be something like this. So here we have declared an array. It's of type double. The array name is balance, and it contains 10 elements. Following that, we've got a statement saying we've got a variable called salary. The type of that variable is double. We are assigning the value of whatever value sits in element 9 of this balance array. We're going to assign that value to this variable called salary. And because all the elements within the balance array can only be double, when we retrieve the value from the array, we have to assign that value to the same data type. So salary was declared as double. This is one way to access values within an array, but obviously this is not ideal because we've got a 10 element array here, and in order to access each and every one of those elements, it wouldn't be good coding to just try to access those elements individually like this. So quite often we will use for loops or for each loops, and we'll have a look at an example of how to do that next. In order to use a for loop to retrieve values from an array, we can use something similar to this following piece of code. So in this code, first of all we create the array. It's called nums. It's got 10 elements, and it's of a type integer, int. And then we have 2 for loops in this particular piece of code. The first for loop actually populates the array. So we are saying as long as I is less than 10, then iterate over this for loop. And the values that we are inserting into the nums array is basically the value of I plus 100. So on the first part of this loop, I will be 0, so it will be 0 plus 100, which equals 100. So the very first element of nums will contain the value 100, and then as I is incremented, then I plus 100 will then equal, on the second pass it will equal 101, and on the third pass it'll be 102, and so on until I is greater than 10. Then this for loop will terminate. The second for loop, we are actually retrieving the values of we're retrieving the values from this array nums. So again, we're going to set up a counter, and this time the counter is we're using the variable name j. As long as j is less than 10, then this for loop will iterate, and we're using a simple console.writeLine in order to output the value of each element within the nums array. So we've got a simple print statement here. We're going to print out the word element, and then we're going to print the index of the array, so the index number, and then we're actually going to print the value contained within that element. So this will iterate again 10 times, and then once j is greater than 10, then the for loop will terminate, and the console.read key statement will be executed. And this console.read key simply allows us to view the console window after the program has terminated. I can also use a for each to retrieve values from an array. This following example shows a for each loop being used to do precisely that. It also uses a for loop in order to populate the array. So right at the top here, we've got our array declared. It's called nums, and it's of type int. It contains 10 elements. We use a normal for loop in order to populate the array as we did in the previous example. And then we use a for each loop in order to retrieve the values from that array. And we can see the difference between the two. Basically, you can use for loop and the for each loop interchangeably. Most programmers actually prefer a for each loop because it's just slightly cleaner in the way we actually code the loop. So the for each loop uses the name of the array, and then it sets up an integer variable. The reason this variable is integer is because the nums array contains integers, so therefore anything that we retrieve from nums has to have the same data type. And then once the num int variable is populated, then we can go ahead and use our console.writeLine in order to print out the value of the actual element within the array. This for each loop will keep iterating as long as there are elements that have not been processed yet. As soon as the last element is reached, it will be printed out, and then the console.read key statement will be executed. So that's a for each loop. What we can do next is fire up Visual Studio, and we'll code up both this example and the previous example and see these in action. Okay, so let's create a console app, and we do that by either creating a new project or going up to here and saying new project. I'm going to call this arrays, and it's a console application. Do OK. This will take a second or two. Let me get rid of programs. Delete that. And I'm going to create my own class. So we're going to do right click and we are going to add. I'm going to add a new item. It's going to be a class and we're going to call it my array. My array. Cool. So that is then namespace arrays and the class is called my array, and within these braces we're going to put our main method, which is a static. It's going to be void because it has no return value. It's capital M for main. Open and close parentheses. String args. And we've got another set of curly braces. And within this we're going to firstly declare our array. So I'm just putting a comment in. So nums is an array of 10 integers. And in order to create an array, we use the data type, and we use the square brackets. We name the array, and I'm going to call it nums. And then we have, because arrays are reference types, we have to instantiate. We have to create an instance, and the way we do that is use the keyword new, and then we use int again with the square brackets, and within these square brackets we put a value in terms of how many elements we're going to have within the array, and we're going to have 10 elements. And finally we can use a semicolon at the end of this line. So that is our array declared. Or we can initialize the elements within the array, and we're going to use a for loop in order to do this. So that's just a comment. For open and close parentheses, int I is less than 10, and then increment I. We've got another set of curly braces, and here we're just going to say nums, which is the name of our array. I equals I plus 100. I've got some squiggly lines. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. I have to initialize our variable. So we've declared the variable I, and we have to initialize it. We initialize it to 0, and then we do the comparison within the for loop. We say is as long as I is less than 10, continue iterating, and then the last part of this for statement is the increment of the counter. And this for loop simply goes to the first element of nums, which on the first pass will be 0. So nums is the array name, and this will be 0, so it'll be the very first element because arrays within C# are 0 indexed. And using this assignment operator, we are saying add a 0 plus 100. So on the first pass it'll be 100. Enter that value into the first element of this nums array, iterate round, increment I, so I will be 1 now, and then nums 1 will be the second element within the array, and so on. So that actually populates our array, and then we will output the value of the array. We'll output the values within each element of the array. Output each array element value. And again, we're going to use a for loop. Open and close parentheses. This time we're going to use an int, but we're going to call it j. J equals 0. As long as j is less than 10, keep iterating. And j++, j++ means increment and j on every iteration. Okay, and in here we're going to have a simple console.writeLine, console write, open and close parentheses, inverted commas. We're going to print out the word element, and then I've got square brackets, curly braces, 0. Equals 1. And we're going to have j, and we're going to also have nums, the square, nums with the square brackets, and j. Okay, that looks right. So what we've done here is we're going to output the value of the array, or we're going to output the value contained within the elements of the array. But first we're going to print out the word element, and then we've got a placeholder, and essentially what this does, it will during runtime it will replace the value of j into here. And likewise we've got a second placeholder, oops, and these are going to be curly braces, not square braces. So this second placeholder during runtime will contain the value from nums and the index. So whatever element nums is on during this iteration, then this second placeholder will contain that value. This will be a bit more clear once we actually run this code. So the last thing we need to do here is just put in a console.read key. Read key, and this will allow us to view our output. So that looks okay. There's no squiggly lines. Let's F5 this to run, and let's see if it actually outputs anything. Okay, so we've got the word element, and then we've got the index number, and then we've got the value. So the index starts at 0 because arrays within C# are 0 index, and 0 to 9 is 10 elements. And as you can see, the values contained within those. So the very first element contains the value 100, and the very last one contains 109, because this will iterate 10 times, but it starts from 0. Cool. Okay, let's have a quick look at the for each. So I'm going to get rid of all of this for now. And we're going to replace that for loop with a for each loop. So we use the keyword for each. We have open and close parentheses, and we declare a variable, and this time the variable is going to be called num in nums. So this, the first num is an integer variable, but the nums is actually referring to the array that we created up here. Open and close parentheses, and here we're going to create an integer I, which equals the value of num minus 100. And then we're going to output this console right line, open and close parentheses. Again, we're going to output the word element, and I've got a placeholder, and we're going to print out the equal sign, and then we've got the second placeholder, and this time we're going to output I and also num. Okay, I think that looks okay. F5 to run this. Okay, so it did pretty much exactly what we did in the previous for loop, but this time we used a for each loop. Let me just quickly explain what we did here. We used the for each in order to retrieve the values. The reason we had to do this line of code was to get back to the value of the index. If you recall, we actually add 100 to the index value of the array, and in order for us to print the index number, we have to minus 100. So in order to print element and then the actual index number, we set up this integer in order to populate this particular part of the console.writeLine, and then the value of num, which gets written into here from here, is then written into this placeholder over here. So a pretty nice, neat way to output values from an array. Okay, so that's it for this short video on arrays in C#. A quick recap on what we did. We had a look at how to declare arrays. We looked at how to initialize our array, and then we also looked at how to assign values to an array. We accessed each element of an array individually, and then we also used a for loop to access the elements. We also looked at how to use a for each loop in order to access elements within the array. The arrays we created in this video were one-dimensional arrays. So they were in this format, in that the array was simply one-dimensional. C# does cater for multi-dimensional arrays, but for this beginner tutorial, I thought discussing those might be a bit too confusing. Just to show you the difference between a one-dimensional and a multi-dimensional array. So this top one here is a two-dimensional array, and the other one is a three-dimensional array. But I think we can leave those for an upcoming video. Okay, so I hope you found this video to be informative and helpful. If so, please do consider subscribing and hitting the like button. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.